Michelle. Welcome. Thank you to all our guests, both in person and on Zoom. This is our second in a series of workshops we're offering. And today we're talking about partnering and engaging community in your research. So you're mostly going to be hearing from Michelle and Allison later today, but as you see, we have this question up, a thought for you to ponder, and we're asking those in person to post their thoughts on the board. We're going to revisit those, as Allison said, a little later. And I believe those on Zoom, if you're comfortable, go ahead and put that in the chat if you haven't already. So again, as I said, today we're talking all about partnering, but community engagement and collaboration, building strong community partnerships through research. As we've talked about in our previous workshop, if you happen to be here, research, of course, is always going to be focused on your disciplinary impact and how you communicate that with others in your discipline. But more and more research now really necessitates partners, necessitates community involvement. So today we're going to talk about some of the models for doing that, some of the best practice, some of the research base around that. As always, we will share slides and resources afterwards. We are here today from the Office of Societal Impact, which is an office that is situated under RII, Research, Innovation, and Impact, also sometimes known as the VPR's office, or now the Senior VPR's office. I think we have a slide about our office. Nope, okay. So my name is Jen Fields. I am the director of that office. I was formerly with Research Development Services, so a lot of the work of our office is around proposal development, research development. But we have the fortune in this office of not only working at that proposal stage, but being available as a resource once your project's funded as well. So please do think of us as a support system as you work on your research plan designs, whether you're a faculty, a staff person, a student. We just really are here to help really maximize the amount of societal impact or benefit to society that comes out of all funded U of A projects. My colleagues here today are with me, Michelle Higgins.
Hi, I'm Michelle Higgins. I'm the Associate Director for the Societal Impact. And today I'm going to be talking about kind of the nitty-gritty of partnerships.
Hi, I'm Allison Meadow. I'm an associate research professor newly in the Office of Societal Impact. And I'm going to be talking kind of broadly about this idea of community engagement and engaged scholarship.
You know, we really try to make the job of the person writing the proposal help connect you with resources, partners, models, evaluators, all those things that are going to help strengthen your proposal. Riley in particular works for Hispanic serving initiatives in that office. We'll talk about that a little later today. And then anyone in here who would consider themselves what we might call a broader impact or an impact practitioner or a partner, someone who generally is not on the research side necessarily, but works with projects to bring that community or societal element. Yeah. a few of us. So as you can see, many of us in this room, you know, wear several hats. So thank you again to all of you for coming. And I will turn it over to Allison, who is going to get us started today.
So we're going to start with sort of a bit of a discussion of like the big picture of like, what do we mean when we say community engagement and collaboration? And like I said, I'm going to start with kind of the really big picture, some of the history of this and the perspectives that we're coming from. And then we're going to really transition in, and Michelle is going to dig into the really like, yeah, but how do we do this? And how do we do it well? So, okay, let's go to the next. All right. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to start with this really big picture. Ernest Boyer, who among other things was the president of the Carnegie Foundation at points, back in the late 80s and 90s, he'd really articulated a four-part typology of scholarship. He's really thinking hard about all of the work that goes on at universities. This was sort of part of his work. So he had this four-part typology, and I think some of this is really going to resonate and sound familiar. First, the scholarship of discovery, and that's basic research, fundamental research, you know, what we often think of as going on in universities. Scholarship of integration, and you know, this is when we were starting to get this idea of interdisciplinary research and blending and mixing different disciplines together in search of better, you know, better science, better solutions. The scholarship of sharing, and this is where he put things like publication and teaching, anytime when we're moving that knowledge, passing that knowledge along. And then he had this section called, at first he called it the application of knowledge. And then so that sort of became the scholarship of engagement. And this is the idea of making knowledge useful in service to society. So this is that big picture of the scholarship of engagement. And he was articulating this as a fundamental part of the work that happens at universities is that we should be engaging with society and striving to make knowledge useful as one of our kind of key pillars. So today we're really focused on that fourth category, the scholarship of engagement. The term is a little bit weird because, I just said like, oh, well, the teaching kind of goes in this section and stuff. So one of the things that Boyer was really clear about, and particularly in this essay, which I highly recommend, it is wonderful. It's a quick read. He was very committed to and very interested in the role that universities could play in improving the health and well-being and education of K-12 of children K-12. So we see in there a lot of the roots of a lot of the work that we see today in terms of engaging with students and engaging in our K-12 system. And I just want to make that note because I'm going to spend a lot of time sort of talking about like research stuff, but I want to make it really clear that the big picture of this is involving all of, very big picture scholarship of engagement means the way that we engage with society in general. And Boyer in particular was saying it is really, really important that universities be involved in the lives of students and teachers in that K-12 system. So I just want to make that super clear. So if you hear me talk about research and keep using that term, keep thinking, oh, wait, but I'm using that, but we're thinking big picture, and the scholarship of engagement involves a lot of that. So really quickly, I just want to revisit a slide that we had last week, the next one. And that's the way that NSF defines broader and societal impacts. And you'll see here that, right, this idea that broader impacts can happen directly through your research and education. So, that engaged scholarship, engaged research, that kind of stuff, or through specific activities that are directly related to, but slightly, slightly aligned with, but slightly separated from the actual research. But in Boyer's mind and in the way that we think about this, it's all part of that. It's all part of this big picture scholarship of engagement. All right. Okay. So community engaged research. So again, I'm going to keep using, you're going to hear, I'm going to keep saying research and research and research. I'm really talking about scholarship of engagement. But I come from a world in which we do a lot of engaged research, and that's my background. So I sort of default to that. I really encourage anybody who does more of that, if you're doing K-12 engagement work, if you do more direct public engagement, public lectures, writing op-eds, working in informal science learning at science centers or museums and stuff like that. Think about how these principles that I'm going to talk about apply to your work. I'm going to talk a lot about these principles. The principles apply really broadly because they are about the way that we treat people when we're interacting and engaging with them. So they apply all the way across the board, even when you hear me keep saying research, research, research. So community engaged research. Engaged, sometimes we call it participatory research, collaborative research, is an approach to research in which the people most directly impacted by the research topic become active participants in the process. Engaged research means partnering with non-academic people and organizations who bring their own knowledge and expertise into the research process. It's really important. They're not just sort of passive participants. They're bringing their knowledge, their expertise to our work. And community engaged research means creating equitable partnerships built on mutual trust and shared learning. We should all go into this expecting to learn from and with each other. I wanted to just kind of throw out, because in literature and among colleagues, you might hear a whole bunch of different terms. They're all kind of related. Action research or participatory action research is sort of is one common term. Community-based participatory research is really out there. You're going to see that a lot in the literature. Transdisciplinary research, public impact research, co-production of knowledge, knowledge exchange. they all mean a lot of the same things, or they share a lot of commonalities. And I just wanted to, bring those up in case you're reading or talking to colleagues in different disciplines and you hear some of these things. I'm going to walk through just a couple of examples in a little bit more detail. I'm not going to go through like the whole history of all of this, but just to give you a little bit more background on some of these. I love to start with action research because in my mind, it's the grandfather of all of this. This is an approach to research that really evolved in the social sciences. It's particularly associated with Kurt Lewin. Started in the 1930s and 40s with this idea that we can use research to make positive social change in the lives of people and communities. And so this idea that we want to have those who have a stake in the problem involved, right from the beginning. Their input is likely to limit the range of trial solutions to the realm of practicality. Lewin was particularly important with this concern with this cycle. Reflection and action. Action research, we have to have action. We're proposing solutions, we're testing solutions. And he wanted the people who were most affected involved because they were the ones who could understand, oh, that's likely to work, or that's really not going to resonate in this community. So he wanted to he wanted to sort of narrow the range and say, if the people who are most affected by this are saying that's not a reasonable solution, or that's not the one that's going to take off, he could sort of eliminate that. So realm of practicality. Their insights illuminate the data, and their involvement makes the ultimate adoption of promising solutions more likely. Again, we're working with people who are affected by a particular problem. If we want to affect change, those folks need to be involved because they're the ones who have to change something. They're going to have to live with whatever change is happening. And so we have to have buy-in. Best way to have buy-in, bring them in right at the beginning, make them part of the process. The culture of action research includes a strong commitment to democracy and egalitarianism, equitable partnerships, sharing knowledge, learning together. Our little cycle here, this is a pretty standard classic action research cycle. We reflect, we take a look at what the problem is. Lewin was working mostly in the social sciences, so we're talking about education, we're talking about poverty alleviation, we're talking about issues that were kind of affecting particularly lower income urban communities at this time. So we're reflecting what the problem is. We're making a plan. What do we think might work? We're going to act on that plan, try it out, and then reflect on how effective that solution was and start the whole thing over again. So that reflection and action cycle was really, really key. Anyway, so again, this was really the forefront of a lot of this approach to community engagement and engaged research. So it's a great place to start. All right, community-based participatory research. This is a much more common term now. It's really shares a massive amount of DNA with action research. It's a little bit more descriptive and clear what you're talking about. It's community-based and participatory, so we kind of understand what that is. You see this a lot in public health and the health sciences using community-based participatory research methods. So that's in that literature. If that's something you're digging into, this is the term you're most likely to see. So again, you're just going to see like really, really similar, right? CBPR is participatory research, is an approach to research that involves collective, reflective, and systematic inquiry. The researchers and the community stakeholders engage as equal partners in all steps of the research process, right from planning to evaluation and reflection. And the goals, educating, improving practice, or bringing about social change. At its core, community-based participatory research questions the power relationships that are inherently embedded in Western knowledge production. It advocates for power to be shared between the researcher and the researched. It acknowledges the legitimacy of experiential knowledge and focuses on research aimed at improving solutions and practice. So we see that action research kind of coming through. The people who are experiencing this have an enormous amount of knowledge about this. They can really bring that in and make the research better, make the solutions better. All right, transdisciplinary research is a newer term. You see it a lot in environmental sciences and sustainability science. And this is the idea very explicitly that we're taking interdisciplinary academic work. So we're working across disciplines. You're going to have social sciences, you're going to have biophysical sciences involved, and you're going to also have practice-based knowledge. So natural resource managers, community planners, people who are practitioners in this field, and indigenous and local knowledge when applicable. Putting that all together in that transdisciplinary space, and we get that little TDR right there in the middle. So multiple research disciplines and our societal partners. And it is, again, based on the democratic practice of engaging multiple knowledges through equitable and mutually respectful partnerships. I say all this stuff like it's super easy and like, you just snap your fingers and you've got a beautiful and equitable partnership. That's where Michelle comes in a little bit, how we actually make some of this happen. But these are the big pictures. Okay, public impact research is another term, another way of conceptualizing this. It's growing a little bit more, particularly because of this group, the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, which is the group that advocates and lobbies on behalf of public and land-grant universities. And they also really sort of take a role in pushing us, because we are one, to live up to our missions and our expectations as public institutions, and particularly as those with a land grant mission, which is to serve the people of the state in which you are placed. So they articulated their definition of public impact research a little more broadly, but I think it's great. Any research that benefits the public. So we can have developing new medications, understanding environmental challenges, examining disparities in education access and economic development. Research that is done in service to community and society is sort of the underlying point there. They're actively calling on public and land-grant institutions to engage in more of this research and use this term, use it proudly, really start this process of saying, this is fundamental, going back to that Boyer, this is fundamental to the work of universities, and we should recommit ourselves to it. And so they've been really vocal on this point, and I think it's really important that we highlight that work. And speaking, to our point today about collaboration, we need to communicate the impact that public university research has on everyday life. We also need to emphasize the values of collaborative research with communities, not just about communities. And that's, again, that idea of equitable partnerships. We're respecting community knowledge. We're understanding that community members, practitioners in this space have an enormous wealth to share with us, and it makes our work better when we do it. APLU makes another point that I think is really important. We have had an erosion of trust in higher education and science. We can all see that in the last few years. It's been a bit rough. They really articulate this idea that by engaging in public impact research, when we are out working with our community members, we are fulfilling that sort of service to society, we can help rebuild some of that trust, because we give people an opportunity to see universities and university researchers working on behalf of the public good in a very tangible way. And so they really articulate that this is an important part of rebuilding that trust in particularly in the public higher ed institutions. So I think that's just a really big component of this. Whatever you call it, transdisciplinarity, if you want to use action research, CVPR, whatever that is, it's not just about the research approach, it's about the attitude that we bring to it. So I love this quote. I share it with everybody. The key element of participatory research lies not in methods, but in the attitudes of researchers, which in turn determine how, by, and for whom research is conceptualized and conducted. So when we're talking about community engaged research, one of our important missions is to stop and say, who is benefiting? How am I engaging with people who know about this, who are experiencing whatever challenge we're trying to come up with, whatever solution we're trying to come up with. And am I working on their behalf? So stopping and really reflecting on our role and our attitudes towards the folks that we're working with. Okay. Why should we do this? Okay, I've sort of laid out like, really big picture, little bit of a moral argument for that. Like we should be doing this. It's important. It's part of our land grant mission. We should be doing science to benefit society. But there's also some really like practical and tangible reasons that community engaged research is really beneficial to our actual research. So I kind of want to walk through that. Basically, it makes our research better to do this. It brings new knowledge and new insight and energy that we can't necessarily come up with on our own. We're just, we're one PI or we're a small PI team. So, okay, let's walk through. These are my arguments for why we should be doing this. We want to have impact in the world. I think that's why everybody's here. We want to do that through collaboration. We need to know what other people know. We need their knowledge. People know a lot about the places that they live, work, play. And they know what is going to work and not work in their communities or more broadly. Jen had a great example the other day, thinking about technology and like self-driving cars. We, as the people who have to live with self-driving cars on our roadways, we have a lot to say about whether that technology is going to be adopted or not. People who have lived on a landscape for generations and generations have a lot to say and a lot of experience that we cannot possibly match by just coming in a short term. So so listening to them and learning from those experiences is incredibly valuable to add to our work. So I have just a few examples here. The first one is from work that a colleague of mine does out in California on cultural burning. This is indigenous communities revitalizing practices around cultural burning that they use to care for and tend their landscape. By regularly burning particular plots of land in particular ways, they're able to cultivate culturally relevant, culturally prioritized species. It's also a wonderful way to control wildfire and reduce wildfire risk, because if you have fire going through a landscape that needs it every few years, you're clearing out brush, you're reducing the chance of a mega fire later. So she works really closely with a number of indigenous communities there. You have to have those practitioners who have been doing this for years, who have been learning from generations of knowledge about how to do this and why to do it and how to do it well. So it's a wonderful example of us being able to learn a lot about natural resource management from people who have been doing this, that we just can't come in. There's no way in a year or two we're going to learn multiple generations of knowledge. So invite people in and ask them to share with you. The middle one is a little closer to home. We've got traditional Tanatamwato, so the shade structure. These are, again, folks who have lived on this landscape for generations and generations and really understand the necessity of shade and how to build for this environment. And I love this because we see it mirrored in this very modern, fancy structure next to it. So we're really learning from people who, again, know how to live in this environment. We can bring that in. Participatory mapping. If you want to know about a community, know about a place, have people take a look at a map and narrate that for you. You are going to learn just a phenomenal amount about how things work, traffic patterns, where the important places where communities meet from this exercise. So it's just a really wonderful way to gather all of that and get a really deep view of what is happening in a community that you might want to work with. People who know and interact with a place or system or technology and innovation, they also ask amazing science questions that you will have not thought of, because again, they have this different perspective on the system and they're seeing different patterns in different ways, and they're going to ask incredibly innovative questions. So applied and engaged research is phenomenal for impact. Applied and engaged research is also incredibly robust, cool science because of the kinds of questions that you're going to get. It doesn't stop with sort of the idea of just applied work. You can just be doing incredible fundamental science because you're getting new nuggets and new ways of seeing your data, new ways of seeing a system. So I just want to encourage that. You never know what you might come up with. Okay. Ooh, nice. we need our partners know-how. Okay, so we talked about, we need to know what people know about their landscape and their communities and stuff. We need to work with people who know how to make change. If that's our interest in here, is, to help people make change, do new things, we need to work with the people who know how to do that in whatever system it is that they work in. So they're the ones who are going to have to take this knowledge and make it happen, right? So if you don't know how to align a science talk for K-12 to your Arizona State science standards, you should probably have a teacher on your team, because they can really help you do that and make sure that your lesson, if you go in to work with students, make sure that your lesson is engaging and fun and really helpful, because it aligns to those standards. It's far more likely to be adopted and used over and over again if you're hitting on all of that. So learn from those teachers' knowledge. If your interest is in changing policy and practice, my little, the bill, the Schoolhouse Rocks. If you don't know how the legislative process works, how you might move through, how to make sure that your science is really relevant and is some, can be pulled into a legislative process, make sure that you have somebody on your team who has that expertise, that know-how. If you want to work in a community, but you don't know exactly who those community leaders are, or how to sort of get community support behind you, how to make sure that the research is shared effectively through the community, make sure that you find out who is a community leader, who can share that knowledge, who can help you kind of gain the trust of the community. So community leaders are important. So we need the people who know how to do stuff on our teams to make it happen, to get that impact to take place. Okay, we need our partners' commitment. I work a lot in climate change. So what I am exposed to a lot is communities who love where they live, who are dedicated to it. And those are people who are going to continue to work on adaptation, who are going to continue to work on whatever it's going to take to keep their communities safe and healthy in a changing climate. If we want to have impact in the world, we need that level of commitment. The flip side is we're not there as energy vampires to suck out their commitment and use it for our research. That's very extractive. We're there to say, oh my gosh, you're going to really help get this done. I see what you're doing. What can I do to support that? So it's a two-way street. We have people who are saying, I'm dedicated to this and I'm not going to stop until we have gotten, XYZ done in this community. And your role as a researcher is to say, fabulous, how can I support that? I include this quote. This is from a collaborator up in Hopi Reservation, and this is a picture of the village of Oribe. Oribe has been continuously inhabited for over 1,000 years. And her quote was, we're not going anywhere. So we need to manage this land as best we can. Unbelievable commitment to getting this work done. And what we said was fantastic. How can we help? How can we look at your commitment and continue to support you through that? And finally, this gets back to this idea of trust. And Ernest Boyer was talking about it back in the 90s, and APLU is talking about it now. When we move into community spaces, we really need to be aware of our role as university researchers, as representatives of the university. Unfortunately, a lot of communities in this country have had very poor and damaging experiences with research. Particularly indigenous communities, other communities of color, there has been an exploitative relationship that has too often kind of colored what's going on and contributed to the lack of trust. So one of the things we need to do is really dedicate ourselves to rebuilding that trust, because it's the only way we're going to get stuff done. So be aware as you move into community spaces that you're unfortunately inheriting some of that past baggage, and it is part of your job to start rebuilding that. You may have to spend some serious time doing that before you even get to kind of the research. It's about that. Take your time. It's learn from people, show respect to people. The other part of this on sort of a practical side is we know from just decades of research in the decision sciences and many other fields, people are not going to use new knowledge unless they trust the source of that knowledge, and basically they trust you. So if you're coming in and saying, my research says this, but you don't have a relationship and they don't trust you, they're not going to use that to make change in their communities. So just there's the two pillars again, right? Like we just sort of owe it to the people of our communities to rebuild trust. And if we want to have impact, trust is really fundamental to that. So I can't resist Pat Summit. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's worth it in the long run to spend the time building relationships, building partnerships, and then worry about the research and worry about those changes. Because if you don't have that foundation, we're going to get stuck. Okay, I'm going to pause because those were the four kind of key reasons that engaged scholarship leads to better research and impact. And also talked, big picture about the sort of philosophy and history of this. So I want to just pause for a couple minutes in case folks have questions. Yeah. Oh, sounds good.
Thank you for that. And this may be something that Michelle will get into in a little bit, but can you give examples or do you know best practices for building trust with communities?
Michelle was going to cover that in
Okay,
fabulous detail.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
but from my perspective, some of it is like, it's not rocket science. Go in, be your authentic self, listen really hard to other people, and give them space to talk and share. Ask, thoughtful questions, especially, if you're dealing with practical knowledge, people who know the community, listening to their stories, listening to their experiences, and just with an open mind and with an open heart. Like big picture is kind of the way it works. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, I hear you say a lot, how can I help you? And in attending a prior conference, they kind of flipped the phrase to say, how can I be useful to you?
Love that.
And so
Love
that
it.
kind of, I think, generates more of a conversation and
Love
builds
that.
upon what skills you have and how that can assist them.
Fantastic. That is a great phrase. Thank you. And do we have one from online? Sure. Oh.
Hi, so this talk is obviously aimed at science people, but as Associate Dean for Research in the Arts, and I would just notice how the arts and humanities are completely absent. And the arts, of course, is a really powerful way to connect with communities. And also the knowledge produced through art making and experiencing art, is embodied in experiential knowledge. And I've been here in the university for a long time, and often the sciences kind of think of art as being in the community and totally bypass the rich research in the arts that's happening here, which creates inequitable kinds of collaborations because the scientists are working with community artists and the academic artists are not involved in the questions and in the plan of the research, but it's like a massive resource. The arts and humanities are, because they produce not so much knowledge as understanding and context for that knowledge. So it's just like it's completely left out of the equation.
Thank you. I think that's actually like the perfect setup for thinking about, when we're talking about like creating partnerships across campus and that idea of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary, when I said like the social sciences on there, we should be very explicitly including the arts and humanities. So when you're building your projects, thinking about who on campus has that incredible insight to build teams here, as well as how you think about what is going on in community. So thank you. I really appreciate.
Yeah, because
pointing that out.
arts is considered to be transformative, and
Yeah, absolutely.
but also in my experience, the scientists reach out to the arts at the end of a project
Yeah.
for broader impacts specifically. And the
And-
artists are not that interested in doing that because they haven't been involved in the question. So it's
I'm a
kind
social
of a perpetual.
scientist and an evaluator, and so we have the same exact
Right,
pattern.
yeah.
That it gets added at the end.
So anyway, I'd like
don't
to
want that.
work together on getting the language of the research in the arts and humanities into the
Fabulous.
equation.
Thank you. I'm going to walk through the last bit of my slides so that we have plenty of time for you. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about ethics because when we think about working in community and with non-academic partners, we need to think about research ethics a little bit different. We need to think about the kinds of relationships that we're developing just a little bit differently than we do when we just have an academic research project. So I'm going to just talk through 4 kind of broad principles that are a little bit different than just our standard research ethics that you might see through, if anybody does institutional review board and human subjects applications. We're broadening the lens a little bit because we're talking about a different kind of relationship. So if I can just, So partnerships are different from studies. Right. So the old conceptualization of how we involved people in our research was that we were studying them and that they were, they were the subjects of our research. And now we're saying, no, we want, this is a partnership and we're trying to establish equitable relationships between ourselves and people outside of the university. And so that it changes the roles and it changes the responsibilities. And so it just changes the way that we need to conceptualize how we behave ethically. So one is really thinking about the ethics of representation. And I love this point that, our research, we do our research and we write a paper or, or a monograph or whatever, and then that goes out into the world. And we are representing the people or the landscapes or whatever, the systems that we're studying to others who have not been involved. The way that we do that, the words that we use, the way that we frame things has an enormous impact on those people. And sometimes we forget that. So it's really important when we are balancing those scales and bringing people in as partners that they have the opportunity to have a say in how they are represented to the outside world. So we need to kind of make that part of our practice, the ethics of representation. So a couple of examples, again, from some of the climate work, when we label a community as vulnerable, what does that mean for people who live there? So it's a really common one. We say, oh, this is a vulnerable community. This is, and that has long-term implications for how people are seen by outsiders. Same thing with landscapes when we call them uninhabited. This is particularly important when we're working with indigenous communities. Those landscapes are probably not uninhabited. They may be used in different ways, in different seasons, at different times. Those landscapes are not barren and uninhabited. When we use those kinds of terms, it's sending a signal to outsiders it locks in a perception of a landscape or of a people. So we need to think about that. So I'm not talking about watering down our analysis, but when we are bringing people in, they have an opportunity to say, oh, this is how we think of our community. This is how we describe it. And this is how we want to be represented to the outside world. So we're just evening that out and making sure that the people who are going to be affected have a say in how that they are represented to the outside. All right. So self-determination in research is another really important one. Particularly when we're working with indigenous communities, but not exclusively. There are legal principles at play when we talk about self-determination in research, but the broader ethical principles really apply when we work with anybody. So communities have the right to decide whether and how research is conducted within their territories and with their citizens. Again, there are legal standards when we are working with indigenous communities in this country about consent. But you know what? You walk into any neighborhood, into any community, they have the right to say, actually, we're really not interested in participating. Thank you. And you know what your job is then? Okay, thanks. Maybe we'll come back another time. Or maybe, we pose that, how can I be useful? If I can be useful in the future, contact me. But they have the right to say no. They have the right to give or not give collective consent, that same idea. Very importantly, they have the right to control the data about community and community knowledge and how that is shared. Again, when we're working with Indigenous communities, there's some really wonderful work out there. I really highly recommend taking a look at the CARE principles for Indigenous data governance, because these really lay out very strong principles about how data is managed and how data is shared when it is collective knowledge and involves Indigenous communities. But I want to emphasize that this is just about good ethics and about saying, it is not my right to take a bunch of data from a community and share it only for my own benefit someplace out there. The community has the right to say, this can be shared, this cannot be shared. This is our knowledge and we wish to keep it quiet and keep it safe within our own community. So it's just self-determination. It's people and communities getting to decide what happens with them. Respect for others' knowledge and expertise. So this is sort of that the ethics of knowledge sharing and learning together. I've just spent all this time really encouraging that, this idea that we were going to work with people from different disciplines and different areas of expertise, communities and practical knowledge and lived experience. So we really need to bring an attitude of humility and respect to that process. And that's like a constant and ongoing sort of self-reflection to say, gosh, I'm inviting people in, or I am being invited into a community to work. How am I going to approach people who have generated their knowledge differently from me, who have a different lived experience from me? And actually, to your point exactly about the arts and humanities, this applies when you are working with other research disciplines as well. We across this university have incredible knowledge that is being generated, and incredible expertise from all sorts of different disciplines who have different research histories and traditions. And when we all come together to work collaboratively, we need to learn that respect for how our colleagues generate knowledge and understand the world, in the same way that we want to demonstrate respect for our societal partners and how they have developed knowledge and how they wish to share it in the world. So both, we really need to build that collegial and respectful attitude. So just the idea of being humble about other people's experiences and expertise that differs from your own, going all the way back to the beginning. People have know-how, people have long-term experience, people see the world differently, and all of that can be enormously beneficial to the kind of work that we want to do. But we have to have that attitude of respect. And it's an ethical principle, basically, to respect that. Michelle is going to dig into this big time. Okay. And the final one is reciprocity. And this is really the idea that we want to ensure that when we are doing research with communities or engaging with communities, that they have a tangible benefit that comes out of this. People are coming in, they are sharing their time, they are sharing their knowledge, they are sharing their expertise. It is our responsibility to think about what benefit they receive from this, and really make an effort to make sure that it is that it is targeted at what they most need, what is most useful. So just a few ideas. Some communities need data, the kinds of stuff that we can do here. We have enormous capacity to generate, to do analysis and generate data that might be really, really important for communities. I work a lot with folks who need climate data. They need to understand what is happening in their community. That's something that we can provide that is helpful for them and useful for them in their decisions. We can think about, taking the research and publishing it in the community language. That makes it easier to share, makes it easier for, people to understand. So think about that as a tangible benefit to somebody else. Training and employing community members. If you've got a big grant, can you build some skills and can you hire students or young folks to be involved in your process? Developing curriculum, getting back to that idea that kind of that the K-12 and working with education is really baked into engaged scholarship. Mentoring students. I love this one. If you're working in archives, can you dig up like cool old photos or documents that the community members might not have ready access to, but again, we might here at our library. So just thinking about what the community would like to have, and can you make that part of your work? And it's that ethic of reciprocity. Okay, So we asked this question at the beginning. I've just given you, a huge, huge dump of information about the philosophy behind this, the history behind engaged scholarship, and some of the really practical and ethical reasons that we should be engaging with communities. So I'd love to just revisit this question for a second.
And this helps us with some of what Ellen was talking about early. We all work in our spaces. And so this is asking you to think about your specific research, and it helps give us examples that then we can use, that we haven't thought about before, that might not be as in close proximity to us. We do need to talk to Ellen more about incorporating the arts and humanities. And that's not just here at U of A. I'm part of a group called Advancing Research Impact in Society that was originally built off really NSF, broader impacts, which of course is STEM. But the reason they changed their name to be more broad is exactly this question of how do we do a better job of speaking about the arts and humanities and the very important role that they play in all of this transdisciplinary work.
So this is not totally in relation to the question, but more something that I was thinking about in relation to some of the things Allison brought up, which is that one of the things that I sort of struggle with / think a lot about in relation to my work is that I do not value all partners equally. And so I do research on immigration and border enforcement. So while I may be engaging Border Patrol agents in my work in various ways, I engage them in a very different way that I engage advocacy organizations because of my political commitments and what I'm hoping the research will do. And so I think it gets really complicated when I think about things like reciprocity, or if I'm going to share my findings with participants before I publish them. The way that I think about those things is different depending on who those different sort of collaborators or people I'm engaging are. And I feel sort of bad about it, but I also feel like it's really important for various reasons. So just wanted to throw that out there because I'm sure that it's something that other people might grapple with as well.
Thanks for sharing that. Because it does get sort of complicated and nuanced, and as you're working with partners. And I'm excited for the next portion of our workshop here, because I think there's a way to build in some mechanisms on how do you set that up? What is it? How do you want it to look, right? So any other thoughts? I know for me, I'm barely starting my research, but I get to work with so many people across campus that I feel like, one, it just expands my mind and how I look at the world and provides different lenses that I get to try on and see, like, what haven't I used before? What lens have I not looked through before? And it surprises me, like as a middle-aged woman, like, oh my gosh, I never thought of things in that way. And I find that very enriching just in my own approach in my work, in my research, and my readings, things like that. So any last comments?
I have a comment online.
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Eileen. I'm with Tech Launch Arizona, and I use she, her pronouns. I interact, my job is to work with partners outside of the university to bring them in to help commercialize research efforts. And I think that's something that we're kind of missing in this discussion so far. I mean, if you have it later, I apologize for jumping ahead, but I think that's something that we also need to take into consideration when we're talking of partners outside the university, because without them, the university IP that's developed cannot get out of the lab, out of the university into the world where it can do the most good. So I think that's another thing that we need to really start thinking about early on in the research process is, here I am doing this great work. what's the next step and how do I work with outside people to get it to a point where it can do the most good? Because nobody sits here and develops a new molecule or a new process or makes new curriculum or artwork just to have it sit inside the university. We have to start thinking about what the next step is. And with University of Arizona IP, if you want to commercialize it, however, license it to an existing company or start your own company or turn your work into an NFT or sell your curriculum to another university, that all needs to come through TechLaunch. And we do have community partners, but if you have somebody in mind already, that makes the process a lot easier.
Thank you. Appreciate your perspective and your input. Thanks for sharing.
And we do have TechLaunch listed as one of our resources towards the end of the presentation.
Yes.
So we will certainly share that information. Thanks.
Yeah,
Woohoo!
that's right. Okay.
This is Evelyn and I'm online. I'm Evelyn Whitmer. In the last year I was asked, I'm with University of Arizona Cooperative Extension, which is the outreach arm of the university. And so we have offices in these communities. So this should be your first point of contact because we do meet with community leaders. We have classes to community participants. So like we would be a really good resource for you. And then recently I've been asked to do some collective impact work in the communities in Arizona. And so that's more with the community engagement aspect of it. So I was really interested in what you guys were working on, but I would love to, have further discussion with you on, how we can move forward. Because I think we're all kind of aiming in the same direction. And of course, more brains are better than just one or two. So yeah, so at some point I'd like to, maybe discuss a little bit more how to move our efforts with your efforts so that we can, do a better job of canvassing our communities. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much, Evelyn.
Thank you, Evelyn. And we have all of our contact information in here. So we would love it actually if you would reach out and let's brainstorm together.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to get started. So I'm Michelle Higgins, and I'm the Associate Director for Societal Impact. And one of the things that I do is provide collaborative project management workshops for individuals who are thinking about starting a project and sort of want to start off on the right foot. They know they want to have some partners. It might be from different departments. It might be outside of the university, whatever. Or it could be teams that are submitting a funding proposal and they want to have an idea about maybe roles and responsibilities for their partners. What does that look like? And then when teams are funded, when a project is funded, I often will meet with a team, kind of know what their goals are, who their partners are, making sure that everybody is at the same table, everybody has the same size chair and the same voice, equitable voice at the table. The other time that I meet with teams, and I've done this a couple of times, is when things start breaking down. And it's usually because they had the best of intentions, but they didn't have a plan. So this presentation is sort of a modification of workshops that I do with individual teams. And I usually have information about the team, who's part of the team, who's from like the different units, departments, institutions, community partners that are represented, the roles that they play. And if I'm meeting with a team that's already going, like, what are some of those sticking points that aren't quite working, that's causing frustrations? So I kind of have an idea of what this team wants to work on or wants to discuss or put into place. And what's really interesting is that once the team sort of gets an email from me, like, hey, we're going to have this meeting, here's your first steps, I start getting emails about what's wrong with their team. Individual people start saying, especially I hear, my voice isn't heard at the table. We make a decision and then things just go back to the way they were. So I start hearing these things. And so I'm trying really hard to work with teams and get them to realize that this is a possibility and why it's so important to start laying out a plan for their team before they hit the ground running. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this presentation today. I use the Collaborative Project Management Playbook for multi-organizational teams, and it was funded, oh, let me go back here. It was funded by NSF, and it remained as a preliminary playbook, but invaluable pieces of information in there. And the team was put together by the ICS group, which is a project management, like an international global group, and the Association for Science and Technology Centers. They did a training on this playbook. And so I've been using that. That's where a lot of the information is going to come from. Make sure you have a packet, because I tried to recreate on my slides some of the things that I use from the playbook, and I'm terrible at it. So I just wanted you to have an idea of some of the tools that are available. And I also have to say that because this playbook remains in a preliminary stage, I cannot post it on our website. I can't just distribute it freely, but I am allowed by the authors to distribute it to the partners that I work with. So I just want to say that, and it's fully cited at the bottom. Okay. So our agenda today is I'm just going to give a brief introduction to what the heck is collaborative project management. You probably already have heard of different ways of managing projects. This approach is very different because at the center is the team. And there's 3 components to it. And it kind of goes to some of the comments that we've heard and some of the things that Allison mentioned before is like, what are some best practices? How do how do I make sure that my team is balanced? This playbook has 3 sections to it: understanding, planning, and communication. And we're going to go through those in 3 different sections. So just as an introduction, this playbook emphasizes the intentional creation of a strong core team rather than consisting of individual team members from each organization, right? So it's not that you just have different sort of ingredients that stay in a separate bowl. We're actually going to mix up the bowl and like make a cake, right? So that they're fully integrated. I love it because it doesn't attempt to merge or change organizational cultures, but rather to coordinate those cultures so that the teams can work well together. That really comes under like all 3, but really understanding your team members. And doesn't it, sorry, that's the wrong one. I made a mistake there. Okay, so that's sort of the gist of it, is that it really works to uncover what are those organizational cultures, because if they don't, if they're not surfaced, they're going to be sort of an undercurrent to the team and then to the project. So what does it help us do? 1, achieve goals. That's the main thing. We need to achieve a goal of our project. However, it also helps us to achieve your goals, your organization's goals, as well as my personal goals. Avoid or quickly resolve issues that threaten the team and the goals. Resolve aggravations that can make a project harder. Who hasn't been on a project that has been unnecessarily difficult, right? When a little bit of planning could have made it easier. Build strong and lasting personal and organizational relationships that will be directly valuable for scaling, replicating, and expanding programs and partnerships. So that's what this playbook aims to do. So very quick overview of that playbook. We're going to jump into understanding your team. That's the first of the 3 sections. We're going to go over, just talk briefly about listening and sharing for mutual understanding. I know Ellison talked a little bit about this. We're going to explore just a little bit, getting to know and understand your team members, and then identify and understand stakeholders and influencers. We often think of stakeholders as our audience. This playbook really pushes a team to explore what other stakeholders and influencers are associated with this project, and how do I get to understand their needs and how they want to be involved. Okay, so jumping right in, understanding your team, listening for mutual understanding. So this book, the playbook, talks about generous listening. I want to hear you and understand you. I will make the effort to listen such that you have the experience of being heard, understood, and valued. Making that a norm for your team. Putting a quote on every agenda that goes out to the team. Putting it in your notes. Just keeping that front and center, that is how we as a team operate. And so in the spirit of generous listening, thinking about, am I listening to understand or am I listening to respond? Am I willing to be influenced? And am I practicing being a slow learner? I know I've been to meetings, and you probably might even be thinking of a previous meeting that you've been in where everybody's fighting to respond. And I know, like for myself, I need some time to process, and I feel like the whole conversation has moved on and I'm ready to respond to the first bullet point. And so thinking about me as a listener, for teams that are thinking about having members who feel like their voices aren't heard, this is something that we might explore further and do some exercises around. There's also the sharing part, right? So we want to listen, but we also want to have a chance to share. So I want to be heard, I want to be understood, and I want to be valued. So you can ask yourself, am I open to sharing to help build understanding among us? Like, what am I sharing? And what is the purpose? And how am I presenting my thoughts and opinions? Am I willing to give up ownership? When I lay my ideas on the table, am I willing to let the team build upon them? Right? So this idea is, I have this idea, thought, perspective, now it becomes part of the team. Am I truly sharing? Or do I just want to like give my own good ideas? And am I setting up a space where I'm encouraging others to share as well? Right? So these are more like norms, but it sets the stage for what are some best practices for building trust with my partners? I think this is part of the ground level. I know you talked about listening. This is just something to sort of keep in mind. When I do work with teams, I really ask them to put this on their agenda as a reminder. It's part of their norms. So that was just a little bit about listening and sharing. Getting to know and understand your team members. And what is this about? So members of multi-organizational teams may have very different unwritten rules, expectations, assumptions, and values, right? And I don't think I've ever been to a meeting where somebody's asked me like, oh, well, what assumptions are you making about this? Because they've explained the project to me. They think that my assumptions must match theirs. My values must match theirs. when these are not uncovered, I'm making decisions on how I participate and my actions based on my values that nobody has asked me about or knows anything about. They just assume we sort of have all the same values because we're on this shared project. We're at the same table. We're from the same department. So that's one of the things we want to get to. And it may differ from others, right? Even differ from who we work with, who we provide services to. In addition to our shared project goals, what does each person and organization hope and need to accomplish or receive? So I often open up a workshop that we have a pre-activity and I ask them sort of these three things. What does success of the project look like? And so they put pretty much all the goals. I get sort of verbatim from the proposal. But then I ask them, like, what does success look like for you? What do you want to get out of this? And then what does your organization or unit, what does success look like for them? Right? And out of that discussion comes things, these sort of unspoken hopes and desires that drive our decisions and drive our actions, but are oftentimes left under the table because we all know what this project is about. We all know what goal we need to work towards, right? But we forget sometimes we're actually human beings in a relationship. And then what matters to each person and entity. Okay, I think I have my activity here. Let's see. Okay, up next slide. So there's also multiple lenses through which you can get to know your team members. One is just the diversity, all the ways that we're similar and different from each other. And I find that I've been told by some groups that I work with, it doesn't matter. We're all academics and we're all here for the best of the project, right? And so just sort of blowing past that. Again, the values, the unwritten rules and assumptions, personal styles and preferences, how we tend to work and how we prefer to work. We're going to go into that in just a minute. And then again, the wants and needs of each team member on the project. Here's where you're going to need your packet because I could not reproduce this. I'm looking at the second page, which is page 21. And it's a values continuum worksheet. And often when a team is having some issues around assumptions, we go through this. Everybody fills this out separately and puts an X on the particular continuum where they would place themselves. Yes. Oh, yes. Okay. So what I'm going to ask you to do is we are all going to participate in how we might vote for our value, what we think about the environment. So it's the second continuum down. And I'm going to ask you to get up and join me down here. We're going to have an imaginary continuum around the environment. So, and I'm going to ask you to place your body where you would place yourself on the continuum of the environment, how you see the environment. On one side, let's make it this side. You think that the environment is controlled by the individual, right? Like we create our own destiny. If you have those types of perspectives, you might find yourself on this side of our imaginary continuum. If you think that you're controlled by destiny, you're going to be standing over here. And you might have this idea of whatever will be, I'm going to make my way through it. Or if you have like something in the middle, you might have a little bit of both. You might lean to one side or the other. So I'm going to ask you to come down and line up so we can sort of see what our values around that are represented in the room. We'll make this line the exact center, like 50-50.
If you are online and you want to drop some notes in the chat about where you think you are falling on our continuum, hopefully you can see how we are. There is a strong grouping on the we make our own. We make our own destiny.
Yeah, make your own destiny. I'm over here a little bit on the, I think I'm just kind of go through my world and see what happens here. Look where I found myself. Interesting. Okay.
Okay, but wait, how many of you just joined the group, but actually feel like you might be closer to Michelle?
Nice. Okay.
Just checking. Thank you.
That's okay. Like, if you were in a meeting with me, you wouldn't know that directly about me. You'd probably think that I share, and maybe I do a little bit, right? I may be making decisions about how I interact on your project with this in mind. Okay, I'm going to do another one. So you'll find this. It says page 23. These continua are around how do I like or how do I tend to work? How do I prefer to work? What is my style? And I want us to look at the one that's second to the bottom, deadlines. Deadlines are due dates. So over on this side of the continuum, works iteratively, making steady progress, and gets impatient with last minute people. That side, last minute people for due dates. Go. Huh? It's just like, yeah, how you tend to work like around deadlines. Yeah, okay. So a little bit better. We have some like pre-planners kind of chugging along, hitting milestones perhaps. And I know me over here, I need that pressure of the deadline, right? So again, if we're working together, we don't often communicate these things, but it may cause frustrations, right? If you don't know that about your partner. I know that I don't want to frustrate anybody, so I try to communicate. Don't worry, you're going to get it by the deadline. You might even get it a day early, but I'll give it to you by the deadline because I know that people have different preferences and it makes them anxious, worried, frustrated, all of that, right? So I just wanted to kind of demonstrate the values, the assumptions, the preferences that we all have. And when you have a group that now is coming from different organizations, a nonprofit, an NGO, public sector, right? They're bringing their own preferences and as well as their own cultural styles to the table. Okay, thank you so much. Any comments before we break away? Any comments? Yeah, okay. Mhm. Very generous of you. Yes, I try.
For the people online, but also they asked for people here to introduce who they are and what unit they're from. Jill, could we ask you to just
Oh,
quickly repeat that?
Yes,
With the mic.
thank you. Sorry about that. Turn a little closer, maybe.
I turn it off on accident?
No, not. Yeah, yes. Yes, I have a big.
Is this better? I was just saying that one of the conversations we had over here was how our responses to these questions are often different if we're thinking about how we work as an individual as opposed to how we work as part of a team. And so just
Yeah.
something to think about.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you for participating.
Riley has a comment
Oh.
also.
It's off. So make sure you turn on.
Thanks. This is Riley McIsaac. I work for HSI Initiatives, Grants Development. I also just wanted to say, because my role really often is to wrangle very large teams. And I think that setting expectations from the beginning, from my perspective, it's not just my personal preference that I want people to hit deadlines. It's that, and I always use this analogy, it's the domino effect. So if you don't hit your deadline, it's going to domino all the way down to the various, timelines and benchmarks we have to get the project or the grant submitted on time. So that is something I set those expectations very clearly from my very first meeting with, potential collaborators and people who will be involved with getting pieces of the grant together, because no one likes to see those dominoes start falling.
Thank you, Riley. And you'll see some of that in the plan section. Okay. All right. Thank you for participating. You may go back to your comfy chair. So you might see how important it is to kind of get some ideas about your partners, your teammates. Again, it's not something that we often ask people to share or ask about or on an agenda item. It's not an agenda item. I used to, before I came to the university, I worked for Girl Scouts of Southern Arizona. We got a lot of emails every day from like the 4,500 volunteers. And there was an expectation. You had to respond to an email within 24 hours. Like you had to. That was one of the things, one of the expectations that was set for us. When I came to the university, or when I would email the university and wouldn't get an email back for a week, I thought, what the heck is happening? Right? Different cultures, different expectations. Okay. So kind of circling back, here's some questions. Again, that I said that I really like to be very explicit about is what does the project, what does success for the project look like? I've worked with teams who had a funded project. This was a kickoff meeting for them. They realized that they all had this idea of success and didn't capture one of the goals as in their proposal. And they made a group decision that they were going to use that, put that in. What has me most excited about to work on this project? Why am I here? Why am I invested? And then what about my organization, right? So being explicit about those. I do we spend a lot of time sometimes on goals, and oftentimes I hear, I hope that we accomplish this. I hope that I get to do this. Is it in the plan? Have you talked about it? Stays hopes and dreams unless it goes into the plan, right? And I find a lot of that because, again, nobody ever asks, what are your hopes and dreams for this? Before we continue on stakeholders, any questions around just getting to know your team? And these are just a few ways. Okay. Now we're going to start thinking about our stakeholders and influencers. Who cares about the project and why? Who will benefit or reject what we create? Who could support it or undermine it? Understanding your stakeholders and influencers gives the team a solid foundation and justification for thoroughly engaging and communicating during the project. So that just sort of sets the stage. And it takes intentional work to identify your stakeholders. I had a team that was looking at diseases that dogs carried, and they had some stray dogs in the community. And one of the stakeholders they realized was one of the women in this community who often put out water and food. This person had sort of a relationship with the dogs and thought, this person, we need to have their perspectives. This is a stakeholder. This is also an influencer for our project. And those are people who really they buy in. They may not have a seat at the table, but they have influence within their community. And so working to thoroughly understand all perspectives. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. In your packet on page 30, this is a worksheet that I use to really drill down with stakeholders. And they have a full list of their stakeholders, person or group. Why are they a stakeholder or an influencer? Relative importance, how much power do they hold? What level of interest? Are they active or passive? And do you think they are sort of for or against the project? Even if you realize like, oh, they're not getting on the bus with us, they still hold influence in your community. You really are going to have to understand what their primary wants and needs. That next column. Do they not buy in because we're not meeting their needs because they've had previous experiences that weren't productive? And then what else do we know about them? Where would they fall on some of those continua that are in your packet? What do we know about some of the assumptions that they're making? So that's this gives a team a full list, and we go through this. I ask many questions about who else. So again, this is just a brief overview, but these are some of the things that I work on with the teams. We're going to move into the plan stage. So understanding planning is next. Planning for a strong collaboration. So it's different than just planning your project. Even though some of the steps look and feel the same, they have a different sort of nuance to them. So we're going to talk about scope and boundaries of your project. We're going to revisit the stakeholder and influencer table and think about how are they involved in the project? And then also risks to our partnership. So there's risk to the project, but what about risk to the partnership that comes from perhaps organizational differences, how they prefer to work, how they tend to work? Are we taking those into account? Are we monitoring them? Those are all about the planning for your team. So scope and boundaries identifies major deliverables that are in scope of the project. And usually when I work with a team, we put a big list and just keep adding what exactly are the activities and the deliverables of this project. What's not in this project? A lot of team members come with hopes and dreams about things that are connected to the project. It's not in the scope of the project. There's no resources that support that. I had a project working with educators. One of their activities was to provide professional development for K-12 educators. What was out of scope, no resources for, was to give the teachers planning time. It's a great activity, should have been in there, but it's not in this particular project. Where are those lines in making sure everybody on your team is aware of where those lines are, because they are using team resources. And also defines when the project is done. It identifies the last deliverable or activity to be completed. The importance. Everybody, the whole team doesn't overlook activities that are critical to accomplishing the goals of the project. Everybody knows exactly what's in scope, what's out of scope. Prevent scope creep. Does anybody have a project where there's scope creep? Right, especially I run into this when these are what I like to call projects of passion. Like it's somebody's long lifetime passion to do this work. They love it, they live for it. That's why they get out of bed. There are in scope and out of scope items. And then it also helps us, as we'll see later, understand each other's work and see opportunities for collaboration. So it's not just about laying out the project, but it's uncovering where people lie in what's in it for me, what's being left out, what do I have to let go of? I often talk about a phase 2 as a way to appease people who feel like some of their activities are getting left out. We talk about a phase 2. Once we have a list of in-scope items, we talk about cross-team responsibilities and involvement. And this is really an approach for considering and clarifying individual team member responsibilities and accountabilities. So the importance of doing this is that everyone knows, ensures everyone else knows how they proceed, how they need to participate, and has a say in how they believe they should be participating. So it's not just looking at the proposal, but it's really looking at where do I fit in? It avoids leaving someone out, for example, from idea generation or reviews, and losing the advantage of their expertise. And it avoids confusion. So a lot of this, like it feels like, oh, I'm just planning my project. You're heading off frustrations, blow-ups, distractions. Everybody is on the same page. And it helps the team identify all possibilities for rich collaboration across the partners. So this is on page 42 of your packet. I did a terrible job of recreating it. That's why I wanted to give you what the tools kind of look like. If you're familiar with a RACI chart that helps to identify responsibilities, in the playbook, they have it modified to a RACID chart. Who's responsible for completing tasks, who's accountable for all the work on the task, who consults or provides input, who's informed but doesn't work on the task, and who directs the work or is the decision maker. So you have this really wonderful chart. Across the second row is where you might put in all of the names of your team members. And this is where I really push them to go back and look at their stakeholders, because even if they're an influencer, they might have an I under their name to be informed. So on the first column, you're going to put in all of the deliverables and activities of the project. So just as an example, I worked over the summer on a project with 2 other partners. One was Girl Scouts and one was Qubit by Qubit. And recruit was like one of the activities. Who's responsible? I'm responsible and accountable. Marissa might have been responsible. Gabby from Qubit by Qubit consulted. We kept her informed and she had some decision making. What's really nice across the top where you put in the organization, it helps to give you a visual of who's missing. Did we actually include everybody in the planning of this project? Are there partners? And maybe we only see one person from that organization who's participating, and we have one other organization and they have a whole bunch of people, right? So it's a nice visual to balance things out. And this becomes a team activity to complete. I know I'm moving through this very quickly, but the next item is really to think about risks. So uncovering and capture possible risks to the partnership. Those tend to bleed into the project, but we're really thinking about the partnership. It helps us to assess, compare, and prioritize risks, collaborate on ideas for avoiding or lessening risks, and it helps us to determine important risk reduction actions that become part of the project plan. So often teams will, I'll get to the form in just a minute. I'll go over these. The importance of doing this is it surfaces risks together and sets a tone for being open and proactive about threats. Helps the team to be objective about how risks could impact the project and the team. Takes advantage of the team's diverse backgrounds and perspectives. A risk to me that I see as a risk, maybe nobody else in the team sees it, but I have a voice to bring up the risk. Acknowledges that the team has natural differences that should be planned for, right? So maybe put in place that if you like to work on deadlines, projects near the deadline, that there's some communication that needs to happen. Helps prioritize risks for the most important action. So these are the important things about risk management to the partnership. And then typical sources of risks. So differences in cultural diversity. And so I'm also sort of thinking of organizational culture. What is it like? What does work look like? What do timelines look like? What is how they work look like within your partners? Values and priorities, communication styles, time horizons, even between departments here across the university. Research timelines are different in different units. Have you taken that into account? And definitions of success. Project constraints are often sources of risk, especially time and budget. Areas of unknown. Have we worked with this particular stakeholder or group before? Is it our first time and we're trying something? And then are we innovating significantly in more than one area? Like, is it all a huge experience? Are we innovating in our research, but we also have new partners and we have new communication lines? Is it all new, right? That could be a source of risk. Project disruptions, people leave, organizational management changes priorities and scope creep. And then also just past experiences. I know that Allison mentioned that we don't have a great track record of working with all populations in our neighborhoods, with all communities. There might be some sore spots that have been left over before, right? Those can be risks. Okay, so we have our risk assessment table on page 46. For most teams, I recommend that they actually keep a risk table, and at the bottom, they're monitoring. They have a chart that monitors their most critical risks, and that it's addressed regularly, every other meeting, once a month, whatever is appropriate for them, that it becomes a agenda item. So this, if you like to be quantitative about this, you can think about, well, how likely or what's the probability of this risk occurring? You can give it a number, a percentage. How severe of an impact, 1 to 10, right? And then you can put those two scores together and maybe prioritize them by how critical the risk is, right? So it's just one way to prioritize. There's also the last column is the owner. Who is in charge of keeping an eye on this? Who's in charge of tracking it, monitoring it, documenting, all of that, right? Each risk has an owner. And so thinking of risk management as an ongoing process. Once a team once there's sort of the spirit of team risk management, it no longer feels personal when you have a risk to not all voices are being heard. Gets put into the table. What do we do about it as a team? Who owns it? How do we monitor it? Any questions? Okay. Team communication, this is our third, is just really planning for how this team communicates and putting into place operating agreements. That could be, what does it look like when there's deadlines? How do we all approach as a team? How do we approach these deadlines? Do we get to be late on deadlines? And what happens, right? The team gets to decide. Also in here is how do we engage and communicate with the stakeholders, putting a plan in place and making sure that plan becomes part of your project. And then at last, we'll talk about critical success drivers. So operating agreements, a set of principles and practices and communication methods that team members agree to use as they work together throughout the project. Those become not just the norms that we often see in teams, like, oh, I'm going to leave my computer off if we meet, or if we meet virtually, I'm going to have, I'm going to be responsive. It also comes down to, well, what happens if somebody's off now on vacation and didn't communicate they weren't going to be in a meeting? Like, was there an expectation for communication about that? So it sets a strong spirit of mutual responsibility. It allows a team to smooth working arrangements more quickly. Sometimes those feel icky to have to bring them up and talk about them because it feels personal. This moves it to a team level. Heads off issues from typical cross-partner operating differences and remote team challenges. Talk about it up front. Ensures communication and coordination is planned proactively. Keeps discussions on track, and it keeps meetings moving. Helps diffuse conflict more easily. And I think that's the hard part teams have. They don't have a team agreement on how to handle conflict, how to handle disagreement. How is that handled? Who gets to make decisions? And how are decisions made? And it de-emotionalizes problems and encourages timely raising of issues, even difficult ones. I think that's the best outcome of this. So on page 55 of your packet, that's what the worksheet looks like. Teams individually team members can identify what kinds of agreements do we think our team needs, and then putting those together. This alone probably takes at least an hour. This is usually like part 2 of our workshop. Okay, for the stakeholders and influencers, making sure that you have a thorough and effective approach to your communication with stakeholders and influencers. As uncovered in the understand section, projects can have both positive and negative influences. And identifying, communicating with, involving, and collaborating with influencers will likely have a more positive project impact because now you're bringing them on the bus with you. So taking that original stakeholder influencer worksheet, like what do we know about them, adding these columns of how to involve them at the bottom. What do we need to keep informing them on? How do we best communicate it? And then when, how often? So it's not that you have to have these exact columns, but it's that you and your team have a plan for it. This is just an example template worksheet that a team can use. I've seen teams modify these so that they can use it best for their team and their stakeholders and influencers. Critical success drivers, yes. These are usually 3 to 5 elements that must go right or be right for the project to succeed. My example project in the summer, it was a camp for girls. Recruitment was a critical success driver. If we didn't recruit, we didn't have a camp. It's a fundamental element that if it fails, the project will fail to meet its goals. Fundamental elements of the project that must be focused on continually to ensure they are met. So identifying critical success drivers, making sure every member of your team knows about this and it's communicated to even the stakeholders and influencers, gives your project a better chance for success and cuts down on aggravations when you know that you have to work towards it. So there was an example, we must complete the first pilot by a certain deadline or we'll miss our window for. So it differentiates between those elements that are critical versus merely important or desirable, ensures that no one is distracted from what matters most. And if decisions must be made about resources or scope, making sure that these elements are not inadvertently compromised. So this work is done as a team, identifying potential critical success drivers. And asking, I find this question is very helpful. If blank happens or does not happen, will that in and of itself cause the project to fail? I think that's a really kind of good way to drill down. If you have more than 5 critical success drivers, discuss them as a team and really determine, are they really critical? And if they are, the team should have a conversation around, are we taking on too much? Do we have too much risk for our team to handle for this project? So it's that team discussion and that team decision. Instead of letting it happen, letting blowups happen, letting frustrations happen, and pointing fingers. The last thing is the last page, putting all of this on a 1 page called a POP, project on a page. It's a great way to communicate everything about your project, all of the decisions that have been made. Yes. Any questions? Oh, any questions? Okay. If you, as an individual, as you're part of a team that's coming together, you already have a team. If any of these things might be valuable for your team, contact us. We're happy to put a workshop together, whatever you need to make happen. All right. Okay, that is it for collaborative project management. We are going to move to making, we have some special guests here today. We need to start at least 1, and then I'm going to hand it over to you. Okay. So we have, I'm going to just go by, I'm going to come back to these slides. And we're going to start with one of our community presentations. We've invited some of our guests to come and share their programs, the expertise that resides within their organization, their foothold in the community, so that might give you an idea of different partnerships. And we have one that has to go right now I thank you so much for coming. I want to make sure that you have time to share your screen. I'm going to let you go with your 2-minute talk.
Hello, hello.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Keith Bentley. I'm an associate research professor at CIRO, the Southwest Institute for Research on Women, here at University of Arizona. If you haven't heard about us, CIRO is a resource and research institute founded in 1979. Our mission is to develop, conduct, and disseminate collaborative research, education, intervention, and research projects of importance to diverse groups here in Southern Arizona. Our work is truly collaborative and community focused. Currently, we have about 68 community partners working with us on 51 different research and action projects. These projects are mostly focused on local social and political health issues. Social and public health issues. And our partners include behavioral and physical health providers, schools, government agencies, law enforcement, tribal communities, and community-based service providers. So the research is important, but for us at CIRO, we're really focused on using our research to inform action. And this action may take the form of advocacy, policy change, advocacy for system change, and designing and implementing better local programs that are more effective and doing what they're hoping to do. I think a good example of this approach is embodied in a project that I recently got funding for from the Garcia Family Foundation called Let's Measure Better. This is a collaborative effort with local government, nonprofits, key stakeholders, and we're trying to improve the sharing of information about homelessness and housing insecurity here in Pima County. Data is extremely siloed and many service providers have trouble getting basic information about their clients, which is a real barrier to them providing good services. This project was a direct response to the pandemic and the ensuing recession. I was working with local stakeholders and government officials trying to estimate what was likely to happen when the eviction moratoriums expired. And I was really shocked to see how little information local policymakers had about literally like anything related to what was going on in our community. And so this is an effort to sort of break down data silos and create new patterns of information sharing. So we're doing focus groups to identify data gaps, creating working groups to try to address those data gaps over the next 2 years. And hopefully we'll have a better system for measuring homelessness and housing insecurity locally. And ideally, we'll have a better care coordination for people experiencing homelessness here in Tucson and Pima County. I think I only had 2 minutes, so thank you so much.
We're going to continue with our partners. We want to make sure that all of our partners have a chance. We're going to come back. We're going to come back and view a couple of more slides. We do have food to enhance our networking experience. So, yeah. Okay, so we have Girl Scouts. We'll bring the microphone over if you want to stand up and.
Hi, I'm Marissa with the Girl Scouts of Southern Arizona. We work in our staff supported program. This is Maggie, my counterpart. So I work mainly with our schools doing school-based programming. So we do after school programming, lunch programming during the day to meet the youth where they are at, where it might not be accessible to. It's more accessible when we're able to meet them in the school setting. Maggie works with our collaboration models. So that's more working with like our detention, group homes, youth and foster care. We have a program called GSBB where we have taken youth to go visit their mothers who are incarcerated in Phoenix. So we just want to meet the families and the youth where they're at and focus on our leadership, our girl leadership experience. And we work with our 4 pillars, which is STEM, outdoors, life skills, and entrepreneurship. And everyone knows the cookie is their entrepreneurship. But as of right now, we have about 27 schools we're working with this school year. And we are slowly transitioning some of them into volunteer-led as we start building that community back in the schools to make it a community hub again, because the schools really want families back and engaged. And this gives the perfect opportunity to have families see the growth in their youth. It also creates a safe space in our collaborative programs for youth to be able to open up and to focus in on something else than everything else that is going on. So it's been great.
Thank you. Hey.
We're also hiring for program facilitators if you're interested.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Paul?
Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Valdez. I am the program manager for Student Venture Pathways at Arizona Forge. Forge is a lovely acronym that stands for Finding Opportunities and Resources to Grow Entrepreneurs. So we have three main pillars. The first one is Student Venture Pathways. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is help students develop an entrepreneurial mindset broadly, so they can apply that mindset to career development, personal development, or to starting a venture. So we want to support them in that broad skill development. And then if they do decide to go on and start a venture, whether that's a for-profit business or like a social enterprise, then we want to be able to connect them to resources here at the university or within the community broadly. We sit within research, impact, and innovation, and we're intentionally college agnostic because we want to be able to cover all colleges. We want all students to see themselves as entrepreneurs. So that's kind of what Student Venture Pathways focuses on. Forge Community is basically our presence in downtown Tucson, but then we're also expanding out to Yuma as well as Sierra Vista as well as Phoenix. And so we want to have locations wherever the presence of the University of Arizona is, to be able to foster connections between our students, our alumni, and our community members around the innovation ecosystem.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. One main thing that I wanted to highlight about Forge Communities is just that the Roy Place building downtown, it's on the corner of Stone and Pennington. It's a 22,000 square foot building. If you haven't been down there yet, I'd be happy to give you a tour. It's rentable space. It's easily accessible from the Sunlink. And so it's a great space for you to have retreats, to have events, or those types of activities as well. So.
Thank you. Okay, Wise Joe.
Hi, so I'm Joe Korchmaros, interim director of WISE. WISE is the Women in Science and Engineering program here at the University of Arizona. It's a program of Zero, which Keith just talked about. And now I have a super high level of performance anxiety because Jill Williams, who is awesome director of WISE for the last, 7 or 8 years, is now sitting here. So I'm going to kind of stand behind her when I talk about WISE programming. So I don't see her face, but the programs I'm going to mention, I mean, Jill built up the programs that were existing when she came in as director, enhance those programs, develop some new programs, and really did a great job. And we really appreciate all that Jill did to build that program. And so WISE was established in 1976, and it's really focused on increasing interest in diversity in the fields of STEM by offering a variety of outreach and student engagement opportunities. And I'll just mention a few of those main programs that are run by WISE. One is the Biodiversity Project, and this is a collaborative effort between WISE, Saguaro National Park, and the Friends of Saguaro National Park, with additional support from local environmental organizations. It's aimed at increasing the diversity of voices included in discussions of environmental problems and the development of those solutions. Each year, approximately 40 U of A students from groups underrepresented in environmental fields are recruited and trained as environmental science outreach educators. And then they work with partner teachers at local K through 12 schools to develop and deliver engaging, culturally responsive and place-based environmental science lessons to between 400 and 600 K through 12 students each week. So that's quite a bit. And this past academic year, the Biodiversity Project expanded partnership from 17 to 21 different academic units here at the U of A, enabling students to receive internship credit in a way that aligns easily with their academic plans. So impact of a lot of different groups, stakeholder groups for that project. Then there's a Creates Literacy project. So in January of 2022, WISE partnered with the Arizona Project WET to launch the Creates Literacy project. And that project bridges literacy and science development through hands-on creative communication technologies. So for that program, program staff recruited 6 local 3rd through 8th grade educators to participate in a semester-long program where they're trained on integrating some of the lessons that they're learning in terms of those hands-on creative communication technologies into their lessons, impacting over 100 elementary students per year. So you think about only training 6 educators at that point, but over the long term, it impacts quite a few different elementary students. Then there's Imagine the STEM Future program that pairs female engineers from Raytheon and female students and their allies from the University of Arizona with high school students at Desert View. And the mentors provide a curriculum that includes a combination of hands-on STEM activities, reflective group conversations in STEM, academic and career pathways, the importance of diversity, and visits from inspiring STEM role models, 40 hours of instruction spent this last fiscal year, 32 high school students reached, 3 partner teachers and 2 new ones. Am I doing okay, Jill? I'm reading my notes. Mentorship program, the WISE mentorship program pairs U of A students with professional and/or academic mentors within the U of A and the greater Tucson community. This last fiscal year program, nearly 100 students from over 12 different U of A colleges were involved in this mentorship program, working towards workforce development and supporting them in their career goals. Then finally, the Launching Your Career Symposium, and I shouldn't say finally because there's other work that WISE does, but the last one that I'm going to talk about, Launching Your Career Symposium, that happens once a year, and that's the only professional development and networking event specifically targeting female identified students and professionals in STEM at the U of A. And this last February, the symposium attracted nearly 200 registrants. So wide reach in that. In total, during the fiscal year of 2022, WISE staff presented and managed to deliver high quality, impactful programming to over 1,600 students. So great job, Jill.
Thank you.
And Gabby and Elena, who are listed up there with their respective projects that they help to lead. And so you can feel free to reach out to them or to me.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Next, we have Joe Watkins. Different Joe.
Good afternoon. Am I on? So I'm the director of the Data Sciences Academy, and it says that we support endeavors to coordinate and lead in all areas of the data sciences and all aspects of university research, education, and outreach. So what I'm imagining is you're all wanting to write grants and you all want to do broadening impacts and you all want those broadening impacts to matter. And so that's the types of things that I'm mentioning that you could work with us on. So Michelle mentioned teams. So each one of these projects that I just give as examples of projects that you might want to work on to broaden the impacts of whatever grant you have, you will meet our teams that are already working on these things. So for example, across campus and in the College of Science in particular, we're working on professional master's degree courses in NFEC. So if in your grant proposal, you want to develop the types of courses that are at that level, then we are here to help you to complement the degree programs that already exist or about to exist or to create your own. And you can meet that team. The provost just mentioned standard practice for standard high impact practices that she wants to see at every undergraduate education. So the Academy underwent a review of the statistics and data science program to implement as many of these high impact practices as possible. So if your grant wants to sort of change the face of your undergraduate education, please come to us and we'll help you sort of create new ways to think about the undergraduate experience. Another thing that's a focus of the university is mentoring research for undergraduates. And we want to do it with strengths in the data sciences, although we'll talk to you about anything. We're partnering right now with UBURP, the undergraduate biology research project, to sponsor 10 students. And we now have a cadre of mentors that are used to working in these interdisciplinary fields, in this case, data science and the life sciences. So if you're looking at mentoring undergraduates and strategies for doing that, please talk to us. We'll introduce you to Jenna for Cubeta and anyone else. And then we spend an extensive amount of work working with teachers and students in the schools. We strongly believe that every child should become a data scientist because they have no choice if they want to be part of the community that we're creating, for better or worse. And so we work with the Southern Arizona Research and Engineering Foundation, the science fair people. We work with the Arizona Department of Education. We work with lots of other groups. We're working in more and more groups, as Michelle can tell you, to try to bring data sciences to teach, so teachers feel empowered to teach it and students feel empowered to become data scientists. And there's ... and the ... says whatever else you think. And if part of it means working with one of the other fine organizations you had in us because you fall in the cracks, please do so. We're happy to talk to you.
So up next, we have U of A's early academic outreach with Manny. Take it away, Manny.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry to interrupt your lunch. I'll try to be brief. So my name is Manny Leon. I am the Assistant Director for the Office of Early Academic Outreach here at the University of Arizona. And the mission of our office is to increase the number of low-income, first-generation college-bound and ethnic minority students who plan to pursue a four-year degree. And we have a number of programs. I try to not make it so small. So I'll try to go through highlight some of those, but these are a number of the programs that we have within our office, and all of them work through our 5 strategies of change.
We're going to distribute the slides to everybody. So
Okay, perfect.
it's okay if it's small today.
So all of these programs will use one or more of these strategies. So our strategies are to work directly with students, to engage families, partner with the K-12 system, foster personal discovery and career aspirations, and then creating college-bound peer groups. And so because of our mission, we do work primarily with Title I schools, right? A lot of our programming is done in the Tucson area. So we have deep connections within TUSD, Flowing Wells, Amphi. A lot of work that we do is with the Sunnyside School District. And we do work across the people that are involved in the K-12 system. So we have programs that work directly with parents to encourage them. The College Academy for Parents works with elementary school parents in the Sunnyside district, talking to them about how to support their college aspirations for their students. And then there's a college camp that the students attend alongside. And then that college camp is led by university students, or students are able to kind of have that interaction with university students. So that's, working with parents. We do have events, and we do support our school staff as well. So we do teacher professional development through some of our different programs. We also have a college knowledge for counselors event that you'll see on there. So we're working with the schools to help them identify ways, and we'll bring in guest speakers and research and folks from the university to talk about what are the best ways to create a college going culture within your schools and support the things that they want to do. And then we've got some STEM programs, MESA, which is the one that I oversee, math, engineering, science achievement. We work with about 60 schools throughout Arizona with a school-based STEM outreach program. So we've got teachers who will do engineering design. With the students, we've got several engineering design challenges the students will work on, and then we bring them to campus as often as we can to compete and share that with both partners that we identify here on campus. So we'll try to bring in professors, graduate students, undergraduate students that can connect with these students and discuss their projects with them. But then we also have a number of industry partners that we work with, and they'll bring in some of their volunteers as well. So we're always looking for different ways to connect with folks and collaborate. Like I said, we've got those connections with the schools. We've been working with the K-12 since 1984, as when our office was established. So a lot of times people are like, I really want to do some outreach. I want to work with schools, but I just don't know how to make those connections, how to get in that's where we can assist, right? Because we've got those connections, but we don't necessarily have the technical expertise in some of the fields that you have the connections with, that you have. And that's where we can kind of provide that bridge and connect you in those spaces. So depending on the different program that you want to, we can always find ways to kind of fold you in or see how we may be able to support things that you want to do. And like I said, the biggest piece, we do want to engage our families. We do want to foster those personal discoveries and career aspirations. That's where we're always looking for university partners. Like, how can we make our families, our schools aware of the wide range, right? We'll talk to students who are like, oh, I want to be a doctor. Okay, what kind of doctor? Right? What field of medicine? Right? I want to be an engineer. Okay, what kind of engineer? Because a lot of times our students don't realize, they hear these terms, but they don't realize the depth and breadth that some of these fields have. And that's where we want to really kind of build that knowledge within our families, so when they get here, they're prepared and they understand where to go and who to connect with, and so they can be successful once they get on campus. All right, that's it.
All right, thank you, Manny. Next is Julie Huber from SARSF.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Huber. I'm the CEO of SARSF. We're those science fair people that were mentioned earlier, actually. It's a good callback. Our mission is we create Arizona's future critical thinkers and problem solvers through science and engineering. And that wording is intentional, that we're really focused on the skills that students can gain through doing authentic research and working with engineering practices. So SARSF started as a science fair, actually in 1955, right here on this campus. From there, it grew to one of the largest science fairs in the world, including students pre-kindergarten all the way through high school from throughout Southern Arizona. From there, it grew to include programs and to focus on programs that really increased student access to these kinds of research experiences. It wasn't enough just to be creating that great celebration and reward for doing science and engineering. We had to give more resources and experiences to students to get more involved. So from there, we still have a regional science and engineering fair that requires a high level of volunteers each year. We have Racing the Sun, which incubated at Tech Parks and actually is a program where high school students design, build, and race their own solar powered go-karts. Really exciting stuff. We also are the regional lead for Junior Science and Humanities Symposium, which is a competition where high school students do oral presentations of their research and compete to go to a national competition. We do free in-school outreach, and this looks different depending on the grade. Pre-K through 8, we go into classrooms and work with those classes for 4 sessions, and we lead that classroom through an entire research project based on their interests. At the high school level, we can do something similar, but we've also just kicked off a new rural program where we match graduate students and postdocs with a specific rural teacher, and they work in collaboration to put a classroom level research project together with those students. Arizona's STEM Adventure is a field trip day where students 4th grade through 8th grade go out to Pima Community College Northwest and get to experience the great diversity that's in STEM. So there's a lot of opportunities there to exhibit or present to those students, get them excited about something hands-on in what you're doing. We also have ACES Camp, which is for middle school girls from Sunnyside, and they get to experience the great diversity of careers that are out there in the sciences. And last but certainly not least, we have Star Lab, which is a laboratory on the U of A campus just next door, where high school students can do their own research projects under the mentorship of mentors from the U of A and from the community. There are virtual opportunities as well as opportunities to work in the lab, depending on those student circumstances and the project, but we are absolutely looking for mentors for that piece, and that's something that is a need right now. So thank you so much for spending time learning about SARSF. You can see my email as well as our website up there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. And next we have ASEM's Jenny.
Well, hello. My name is Dr. Jenny Batchelder. I go by Jenny, pronouns she, her, hers, ella. I have the pleasure of being a part of this incredible Arizona Science, Engineering, and Math Scholars Program, or ASIMS for short. Our program specifically recruits and supports undergraduate students from underrepresented identities in STEM. And so with our scholars, about little more than 75% of our students are first generation college students. About, 53% are Latinx, 69% are, that one's first generation, 76% are low income. So we're serving a lot of diversity, a lot of students who have been told maybe this isn't the right path for them or they should go a different direction. But our program takes an asset-based approach. And when working with these scholars, we know they are there with a mission and a purpose that they're coming with, and we empower them with that and help them to see not what everyone's told them, but what we see in them individually. So our program is an incredible opportunity for them to really pursue what they are interested in. We help them also more clearly define that, specifically helping them to figure out what their next steps are. We have a lot of great direction in whether they want to go to graduate school or industry, working in their specific career fields, honing in on what that specific interest might be. Specifically through engaging them in research opportunities where possible. So through our program, there's 3 different courses that we engage them in. One, to get them well acquainted to the University of Arizona as either a first year or a transfer student. Then we have them, there's an opportunity for them to learn, to learn about professionalism in STEM, and then research readiness, getting them engaged in that research process. As participants in this program, we get to pair them up with a peer mentor that helps them to, break down a little bit more barriers when they don't want to talk to professional staff about certain things. But we make sure both through those peer mentor conversations and through professional staff conversations that we help them normalize their situation and turn those situations into questions that we can solve and help them persevere through and persist. And that's what leads to our persistence rates. 92% of our students, our scholars, are retained through their first year, which is at least like 11% more, but that I think it's like 83 or something across the campus is pretty standard for STEM, but that includes our numbers too. So we're helping those numbers stay up high. So we are very much committed to serving these students and helping them to be empowered by their future in STEM. Happy to answer more questions. Oh, and we've won national recognition. In 2020, we received the Excelencia Award for serving Hispanic students in STEM. And that's a national recognition for our program. And I believe there was one more before that in 2021. So we are nationally recognized for the work that we're doing, and we're excited to be in partnership. I know, Manny, I got to work with you this spring. So if there's other high school programs or community college programs that wants to partner with us, we'd love to help bridge those programs together so that we can help them be successful where you are, and then also feed into another really successful, empowering program once they get to the university. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jen. We have Ilda Ladner.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Ilda Ladner. I'm the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Pima Community College. I use she, her, and ella pronouns. I've been at the college for about 4.5 years. Hopefully you can see some of the information out there, but I know that a lot of times you think about different partners in your grant writing and different opportunities that you may be pursuing. And it's important to remember that a majority of students of color start their education at community colleges. You can see the diversity of our students. We serve about 17,000 learners each year. 46% of them identify as Latinx, Latino, Hispanic, 5% African American, 2% Asian Pacific Islander, Desi American, and 2% Native American students. So we are a minority serving institution as well as a Hispanic serving institution. This is important because I'm always trying to find equitable access for our students to find good pathways through education. Many of them come into Pima Community College looking for, that next step into higher education, and it isn't always possible or clear. And so we're always looking for partnership opportunities. Right now, a couple of projects that we're really focused on at the college are around investigating what the high impact practices are in equity and student retention for our part-time learners. over 70% of our learners at Pima Community College attend part-time. And so we want to make sure that we're identifying what those important practices are that are going to lead to part-time student success. And a lot of this has to do with being parents, having multiple jobs, income, so many different variables that impact our students' access to higher education and their ability to attend college on a part-time, full-time basis. So this is kind of the focus of our work. If you're thinking about some of that, please get in touch with me. Another area that I really work with quite a bit is our Immigrant and Refugee Student Resource Center. We have a very large number here in Southern Arizona of students that are DACA eligible, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival, undocumented, or are currently DACA status, and a lot of refugees as well in our community that really need help with the navigation through higher education as first generation students for many of them, as students who might be looking at paying out of state tuition for their programs. So wherever there might be opportunities to help in funding and helping these students access education is what we're trying to do. And another just important fact is that if you haven't really kept up with some of what's going on, DACA is renewing right now, but they haven't been accepting applications, new applications for over 2 years. And so that means that a lot of the students in our K-12 system that are eligible haven't even been able to apply. And so they're here as undocumented students not having access through DACA to our, here at U of A, I think it's 150% tuition that they might be eligible for. At Pima, we don't even have that. So really trying to address some of those access issues. And as far as Pima, those are sort of images of some of our different campuses. We have 5 campuses across Tucson, Arizona. We do dual enrollment in a lot of our high schools. We have adult basic education as part of the services that we offer. Those numbers aren't included in our 17,000 that I was just talking about. We have associates in transfer, which would probably be of most interest to everyone here, but we also have career and technical education. And a lot of those students may be starting there, but might want to think about future pathways into other educational programs. And finally, my name again, Hilda Ladner. I'm the DEI officer, and my email's up there, hladner@pima.edu. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilda. Okay, that was our last presentation. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Jen to close it out.
Another big round of applause to the partners who came to speak today, the potential partners. This is a sampling of folks we have worked with in the past, folks we know do great work in the community, but there's many others out there that we can help connect you with. For instance, Michelle talked about this organization, Qubit by Qubit, in one of her projects. That's a national organization that she found. She didn't have a relationship with them before, but she was looking for someone that would work for this project. And so those are some of the areas that we can help. Very quickly, I want to wrap up by just saying, there's lots of literature out there about community-university relationships, but it's almost always from the university's perspective. We'll put out some publication, aren't we great? Don't look at all these communities we work with. Look at how much impact we're having, but we rarely get the voice of the community. So myself through our office and Maribel Alvarez commissioned a study out of our very own Bureau of Applied Research in Anthropology, where they have created a study. It's about to be released. So this is a little bit of a teaser. When it is released publicly, we will certainly share with everyone. But it was really looking at those community perspectives. And for this study, they looked locally. So really people sort of in the Southern Arizona, Tucson area. They were partners, mostly from community-based organizations, and all different types. You can see short to long-term relationships, informal to formal, all sorts of different types. But it's a very qualitative study. So there are a lot of quotes from those who were interviewed. They talked about negative things as well as positive things. So it's really a good way to just get a perspective of what the community finds important. You heard many of these things as we went through today. These were kind of some of the characteristics that were talked about and their experiences working with U of A. Again, some positive, some negative, but these ideas of access. We heard Michelle talk about clear expectations and assessments. Oftentimes we involve a community partner and we're not that good about communicating even, a lot of things Michelle talked, but even communicating results at the end, or just not involving them in assessments. So in the report, you'll be able to hear about all these different things. This idea of branding versus commitment that came up. Again, oh, don't we look great? Oh, look at all these great organizations we partner. Is that just to improve the U of A's brand, or is there a true commitment there? So those were some of the elements that are talked about in this report. And again, these themes came across that Michelle talked a lot about: communication, time and commitment, and the sustainability of this partnership, access to university resources, sharing of those resources. And then this idea of bridging the gap between the community and the university. We've all heard people in the local community talk about kind of the U of A as this sort of monolith in the community. It's inaccessible, it's unapproachable. So there's community perspectives on those things. There's at the end, there's sort of these summary considerations for university partners as we're reaching out to the community. What are some of the things that we need to be thinking about? We're pressed for time, so I'm not going to read every single one, but these slides will all be shared with you. But things like salaries, did you involve them from the outset? We hear over and over again. We heard today, oh, we contacted so-and-so, whether it's the evaluator or a project, at the last minute. We've already got all the ideas. Now we just need you to come in and do X or do Y. Are you involving them early? Thinking about financial costs. Flexibility. Michelle talked a lot about this idea of styles, and have you acknowledged them? All sorts of good things. There's also a section in the report that has advice for community members when they are being approached by the university. Here are some of the things as a community organization you shouldn't be afraid to bring up. You should not, hesitate to talk explicitly about. So there's a section on that as well in the report. We talked about resources. You heard from a few folks online who said Tech Launch Arizona as one example. Cooperative Extension is on here. So great to hear those folks speak up. But our own office, the Societal Impact Office, we're trying to create a partner database. There's an initial pilot version of it up there, but we want any potential partner, anyone who's interested in working with the U of A or with community members, to enter yourself in this database on our website. It's a potential partner database. So it just helps people understand who you are, how to get in touch with you, and what the types of projects that you might work together on. Edge Learning, there's a lot of responsible conduct of research trainings. And in fact, they recently added one specific to community engagement, but there's many others to think about. And then we talked about working with specific communities. So if you are interested in working with tribal communities, U of A has a very specific tribal consultation policy. You are not to submit a research proposal saying, oh, I'm going to do X on this tribal land or with this tribal community, if you have not spoken and consulted with leaders in that community. Could be education leaders, could be all sorts of leaders, but if there's no evidence that you have consulted with the folks in that community, you cannot submit a research proposal. So there's a website, there's a lot of other certainly great resources on that website if you're interested in working with Indigenous populations or tribal communities. We heard from Riley earlier. She's with the Hispanic Serving Initiatives Office. And as I say at the bottom, this is just a sampling. There's lots of resources on campus. But again, we are happy to kind of serve as a conduit to help you find some of those folks. And so in closing, we want to just say thank you to everyone here in person and online. We had a number of questions about would the slides be shared, would the handouts be shared, and we will share all of that with you digitally in the next few days or week. Our contact information, those of us involved here today, and our office's contact is on this slide. We do have a third workshop in this series that's all about evaluation and assessment. How do you know you're achieving your goals? How do you know what's working and not working? That is not until September 20th. those are a little bit of a break for you to kind of absorb some of the stuff we've talked about over the last 2 workshops, and then come back in September. At that workshop, we'll also have there's will be a networking session that will include evaluators on campus. So folks you can connect with on your projects to help you with evaluation. And we would love for your feedback about this workshop today. So there's a QR code. If you happen to have your phone with you, you can use that. Or there's this link. I think the folks online can see this as well. You can also use the QR code. So we really very much appreciate your feedback about this workshop, so we know what we missed, how we can improve it. And then we would love to work with you to incorporate some of those elements that are missing